un rapport ou pas, ou c'est complètement l'opposé, de cette réalité virtuelle. Et actuellement, on parle que la Terre et l'humanité sont en train ou vont ascensionner. C'est quoi le rapport?
Okay, I would ask, what's the question?
What's the question?
Is there a connection,
the connection
between the world being virtual and the Earth ascending?
Ah, okay. I've had more comfortable things in my ears, but yeah, I'll put it on when I need it. The virtual reality is in existence in order to give people a more direct path toward ascension or evolving the quality of their consciousness. So that's the point of the virtual reality, is that it gives us, us consciousness, not us bodies, but it gives us as consciousness an ability and a tool with which we can evolve. And I think that's what you mean by ascension, that we can evolve more spiritually. Yeah. So that's its whole purpose, is to help us do that. And mostly this is a
ascensions leads to virtuality.
Yeah. When you talk about ascensions, that seems to be like you're talking about not elementary school, but graduate school. You're talking about very advanced individuals. And there are very advanced individuals among us. Not a lot of them, but there are a few. And the reason is because you keep coming back. You see, you never grow out of this need to evolve. You first evolve yourself. And as you evolve, you get to be a more spiritual person. Once you get past a certain point, now what you're doing is teaching. You're helping other people evolve. You're being a good example. You're enabling others. You see, it's about others. And there's always work to be done like that. So it's not just all about you. It's not all about me. It's not that we get to a point where we're evolved. All right, see you later, suckers. I'm out of here. It's not that sort of a thing. It's like I get to be evolved, and it's all right. How can I help? You see? So it's a different attitude. It's how can I help? How can I give back? How can I help somebody else learn? So the people who are very grown do tend to keep still coming back and coming back. It's not that there's an exit strategy. It's not we grow up and leave and get out of town. It's we grow up and we get better at giving. We get better at helping. There's more we can do. So there is no real end to it. Now, if you wanted to go to some other reality frame because you just didn't like it here anymore, you could. There are other reality frames. There's other virtual reality games that you can play in. This is not the only one. Some of them are more spiritually advanced than we are, and some of them are less. There's various. So you can jump to another frame, and that way you can leave here. But as far as leaving so you can play a harp on a cloud for the rest of your life, or leaving because you are now have arrived and you don't have any more learning to do, that's wishful thinking on the most part. There's always more to learn, more to grow, because the system can't just sit on its laurels and still survive. If you're not working at lowering entropy, entropy is going to naturally increase. That's like I say, you have to always do maintenance on your home. If you don't always pour energy into something, it will slowly decay and go away. So we have to keep working. So there really is no end. The larger consciousness system is a real finite system, and it is still evolving. So it's a moving target. It's not like there's this place you get to and you're done. that place keeps changing as the whole system evolves. So there's not really a reason to go elsewhere unless you're really mostly thinking about yourself. Well, I want out of here. I want leisure on a golf course or something. I don't want to do this teaching. These people bore me, kind of thing. Well, if those are the kind of thoughts you're thinking, you need to go back. You're not ready to leave. You see, because that's about yourself. It's not about other. So we have a lot of people have the idea that they're working on this to escape. And some of that's Eastern philosophy, where you work to escape this cycle of misery and whatever. But that's not the point. It's not that you're trying to, get out of school. It's that you're trying to help. The whole thing is about being loved and about caring. So what you do when you grow up is you help other people. So you're still a part of it. You're still here. But your life is full of joy and happiness because you don't have all that fear and junk that makes you unhappy. So it's not like you come here and it's miserable. You're only miserable now because you have all that fear. That's what makes you miserable. If you come here and you don't have fear, well, your life is joyful. Your life is good. It's fun. And yes, you're helping, but you're not miserable. You know a lot of people who are miserable. You're trying to help a lot of people who are miserable, but you have compassion for them. You care about them, and your life is fine. Your life is very good. So it's not like this is always the hellhole that you think it is now. Wow, this is a tough place. I don't want to be here anymore. This is really rough. My life is miserable. Well, you do outgrow that. When you grow up, your life isn't miserable anymore. And when you come back, your life isn't miserable. Your life is happy. You come here and you have a lot of fun. And you enjoy helping people. You enjoy making a difference. And it's a good thing. It's much more interesting than playing a harp on a cloud. And kind of a stasis of, I'm done. I don't have to change anymore. It's much more interesting to come here, have a really good time, help a lot of people in the process. Okay.
Other question? More questions?
Am I going to need my earphones?
Yes.
Okay.
Oui, j'ai une question qui est pour moi importante, qui paraît peut-être pas très sérieuse, mais qui l'est très sérieusement. Alors, au premier coup d'œil, je voudrais savoir quel type de scientifique vous êtes et dans quelle catégorie vous vous mettez. Ma question est la suivante. Est-ce que la poule est arrivée la première ou est-ce que c'est l'œuf? Et en ce moment, on dit que c'est la poule qui a existé la première. Dans quelle catégorie de scientifique vous vous trouvez là, à ce moment-là? Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez?
All right. Well, I'm a little confused, but let me try. There's an old question, and it's posed because they think there's no answer, but of course there is an answer. There is a right answer, and that is, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And of course you can't have a chicken unless you have an egg first, and you can't have an egg unless you have a chicken first. So which came first, the chicken or egg? Well, evolutionary biology will solve that problem and tell you they both evolved together. You see, they both evolved together. You don't need one to get the other. You ended up with a critter who could reproduce with eggs. Instead of internal eggs like we humans have, it was an external egg. That was a new wrinkle, a new wrinkle in the process, and it worked, and it was survivable, so that went on. So it just was an adaptation. Both evolved together is the scientific answer. The first part of the question was, what kind of scientist am I anyway? And the answer to that is a physicist, not a biologist, but that's my 2 cents worth. I don't know if I got it right or not. Did I miss it? Okay. I get off easy on that one. Thank you.
You want to finish?
Could you please explain a little bit more how to deal with fear? Yesterday you were giving explanations. Could you explain further? I thought it was really interesting and practical.
Okay, this is more of an application. I told you yesterday how to find your fear, because fears are hard to find. You look for the ego, and the ego is easy to find because you're unhappy. You don't feel good. If you don't feel good and you're unhappy, then the ego's having a problem, and the ego's having a problem because there's a fear. So that's how you find your fear. Now the question is, how do you deal with it once you find it? Well, finding it is difficult enough, but you can, just if you keep at it, because you will tend to lie to yourself when you look at your fears and you say, oh no, that's not it. You know, we tend to deny our fears, so just finding it is not a trivial problem. All of this stuff is a lot easier to say than it is to do. Oh, just follow your ego to the fear and get rid of it. You know, that's real simple, but it's not that simple. The only antidote for fear that works is courage. If you're going to deal with a fear, you have to have courage. It's not easy. There's something that frightens you, scares you, and you just have this strong feeling that if you don't control the situation to keep this scary thing from happening, it'll be awful. It'll just be horrible, and that's where the fear is coming from. So we act in ways that keeps that fear at bay, keeps it so we don't have to deal with it, so it doesn't rear its ugly head. And we have strategies for doing that, all sorts of strategies. You know, for instance, you have somebody who is afraid that other people won't like them, that they're just not very worthy, they're inadequate. And this fear can be expressed in two opposite ways. One, you get a bully. You know, people don't like me, well, I'll show them, you know, and I'll be tough. They'll have to, you know, they'll have to come to me, they'll have to deal with me because I'm big, I'm bigger than they are. You get bullies. And the other thing you get on the opposite end is the shrinking violet. Somebody that stays away from people, stays off to the sides, you know, doesn't talk, doesn't get in the interaction because they know if they did, they'd humiliate themselves. You know, that kind of thing. So there's two totally opposite strategies for dealing with a very similar fear. So we don't always know what our fears are, but when we do, the way you deal with it best is to face it. Once you pin it down and say, all right, this is it. I'm inadequate. I don't measure up. If I just show myself as who as I am, I'll bore everyone because I'm not very interesting, you see? And you just have this belief. So you decide to be the shrinking violet. You just stay away from people and you don't say much because you don't have much to offer anyway. Everybody else is more exciting and interesting than you are. You know, you've got this kind of belief. You deal with that by just having the courage to be yourself, to say and be and interact however you really would like to. So you walk up to that conversation and you just interject yourself in it with the courage that says, if they reject me, that's okay. I'll accept it. I won't run away crying. You see, that's the courage. I'll accept how I am, but I'm not going to be a shrinking violet because I'm afraid. I'm going to go interject myself in life. I'm going to meet people. I'm going to make friends. I'm going places. I'm taking a vacation with the such and such club to whatever, and we're all going to have a good time, and I'm going to join them. So you have the courage to be who you are. Well, what that means is you're being authentic. The authentic you, not the you that is the image that you portray so that the fear won't bite you. That image being, I just like to be left alone, thanks. You know, I'm just fine over here by myself. I like being by myself. You see, we have that as our reaction. Instead, you say, well, I really don't like being by myself. This really isn't what I want. I'm really not happy. I don't have the courage to go interject myself in this. Just do it. Say, I need the courage. Suck it up and go do it and see what happens. That's how you beat a fear. You just have to accept it and say, okay, I'm a schmuck. You know, Nobody's going to like me, but I'm going to go in there anyway and see what happens. I'm not going to let this bother me. And if they all laugh at me or whatever, that's fine. I'll go someplace else. I already accept. I'm a schmuck. I know that. And I'll just find some people that don't mind interacting with schmucks. So you have that attitude. Now you're authentic, you see? And what you'll find is your fear is totally unfounded. What you'll find is that what you feared was being brought about by your fear. We make our fears come true. The things we fear, we manifest. Why? Because that fear is a lot of strong being level energy. We modify future probability with that intent. We create the things we fear to happen. So, you know, you're a parent and you fear that your children are going to get in trouble and do drugs. So you never let them out of the house. You lock them up in that house and, you know, they never can leave. So here they are, they're 16 years old, never been out of the house, except with you holding their hand. Well, as soon as they get loose, the first time they go to college and mommy isn't there, they're wild, they go nuts. They do drugs, they do everything. So you see, your fear creates the problem. So you have to let the fear go. Courage is the only thing. Once you make the fear specific, courage is easier. When the fear is just this amorphous kind of scary thing and you don't really know what it is, you just know you feel bad, it's hard to have courage with that because you really don't know what the courage needs to be. What do you have to be courageous to do or be? So find the fear and then just suck it up and do it anyway. Let the chips fall where they may. When you let the chips fall where they may, now you set yourself up to grow. Because, okay, I talk to people and I get rejected. Why? Well, ask them. Find out. And if you care enough about wanting to be accepted by those people, then do what you need to do. You know, change. Part your hair on the other side. You know, wear designer jeans. You know, whatever it takes to get into that crowd, you know, if that's what you want. Or you might just find that, why did I want to hang out with that crowd? They're a bunch of schmucks. I'm okay. These people are petty. You know, why did I ever want to be part of that crowd? And then you go off and have your own life, you see, and do well. So it works itself out. If you just have the courage to go do it and let the chips fall where they may. Let those people be how they are. Well, it's good to know exactly how they are. And if they show themselves to be petty, you don't need them. You don't need to hang out with them or have them be your friends or think good of you. You don't really care what they think. Find some nicer friends. Nicer friends who will like you for you being just the way you are. You see? And there are people that will do that. You just have to find them. So you let go of expectations and say, I'll just be me. I'll be authentic. I'll live in the moment. I won't live in the future cowering from fear. See? That's just a commitment. Scary, because you just know deep down inside it's going to be horrible, but it almost never is. It's very, very rare that it ever turns out to be horrible. It almost always turns out that the fear is a paper tiger. It just looked like a big bad tiger and it's just tissue paper, it's nothing. That's the way it almost always turns out. I had my son when he was my oldest son. I have an oldest son who's 45 years old, probably older than half of you. And he, when he was like a year and a half old, not quite 2, he was just a toddler, not too steady on his feet, you know, fell down half the time anyway, after 2 or 3 steps. And we were visiting people, and they had a big dog. I think it was a big husky. And of course, the dog was taller than he was. And either the dog bumped him or he just fell down. One or the other. And the dog walked up to him and looked down at him and like, what's up, kid? You know, why are you lying on the floor? And it scared my son to death because he was this big dog, probably weighed 10 times what he did, with teeth that were that long, you know, looking right at him like he was going to eat him for lunch. So he screamed and hollered, and we came in and picked him up, and eventually he got all right. And, you know, 10 years later, 12 years later, he's afraid of dogs. Dog never hurt him. Dog never attacked him. Dog was never even aggressive. You know, the dog was just a big floppy dog. You know, he wasn't threatening at all. But in his mind, he was afraid of big dogs. That's a paper tiger. You see, you just have to have the courage then to walk up to a big dog and pat him on the head and say, nice boy, even though you're frightened. And when he just licks you as a response, you start getting over it. You realize that your fear was irrational. All fear is pretty much irrational. All fear is, I shouldn't say that, all fear is irrational. Most fear is irrational. All fear is not helpful. All fear is a problem. And people will sometimes say, what do you mean all fear is a problem? I don't go into the woods at night because of the bears. That's a good fear, it keeps me safe. No, that's not a good fear. There is no good fear. You shouldn't go into the woods at night because you're not stupid. Because you don't, you know, there's a lot of hungry grizzly bears in that woods, and you don't go in it not because you're afraid, but because you're not dumb. You'd have to be dumb to walk into the woods at night with all the grizzly bears walking around, right? So it's because you're intelligent. Being fearless doesn't mean being stupid. There's a big difference there. If you're fearful and you end up in the woods, you're a whole lot more likely to be eaten than if you're fearless and end up in the woods. Because if you're fearful, you smell like lunch to a grizzly bear. If you're fearful, you'll do the wrong thing. You'll run when you see one, and of course a predator will chase if you run, whether he's hungry or not. You run, he chases, that's just an innate reaction. If you're not afraid, you may know the rules. You may know whether to, you know, look at him in the eyeball or not. You know whether to back away slowly or to run for a tree. You know all the smart things to do, and at least your probability of survival goes up because you're fearless. You're not afraid, you're thinking, you're not panicked. Fear is never an advantage. Fear is always a disadvantage. Sometimes people confuse, they say, oh, if you're fearless, you're stupid. You know, if you're fearless, you'll jump off the top of a building. No, that's if you're stupid, you jump off the top of a building. If you're fearless, you know, you stay away from the top of the building because you're also smart enough to know that you might slip and fall. Maybe it's wet or slippery or something. So that's, fear is something to grab by the horns and wrestle to the ground. And it just takes courage. No easy way to do it. You got to really want to. But if you want to, it won't take you long to succeed. It'll be excruciatingly scary for a few weeks, and then it'll get better, and then it'll go away entirely. And then you're so much better off. Once you get rid of the fear, it's like this big weight just came off your shoulders. You're a whole new person with a whole new life. So it's important to get rid of those fears. Fear is the problem. Love is the answer. Fear is the problem.
One or two more questions, then we have to close up.
Oh.
The question I had is, have you had much communication or collaboration with any of the other digital physicists you mentioned today? And if so, what were the thoughts on your MBT model?
Well, you know, I started out with the mistaken idea that people who were really interested in consciousness researchers, people who are interested in computer intelligence, you know, that sort of thing. My book too, I talk a lot about, you know, conscious computers and things. That people who were very interested in these fields would be very interested in my books. So when I first published them in 2003, I sent out like 50 copies to these people that I deemed that were interested in this sort of thing and should find it very interesting. I didn't get any replies whatsoever from any of them. Nothing, you see? And then I talked to some, sent emails to a few, and the one digital physicist I sent an email to was Edward Fredkin, and explained that I agreed with him and that I could logically show that if this is a virtual reality, then consciousness is the computer. Never heard from him. Okay. I just came from a conference last week with the International Association of Consciousness Researchers. And I gave a little talk there. It was only an hour, so I couldn't say much. You know how I am in an hour. It takes me an hour to say just a little bit of nothing, right? It takes me a long time, because when I have a theory that's, you know, this broad by this deep, you know, and it takes a long time just to build up the lead-in that you need in order to get the concepts. Because if you just say, oh, I think virtual reality is the answer, and consciousness is a computer, and that's how that's how the whole system works, they'll look at you like you're nuts, because you haven't given them enough logic to follow it. Well, anyway, I found out at this conference that everyone there was trying very hard to make consciousness out of physical matter. Everyone there had consciousness being generated by a brain, had consciousness oozing out of their pores into ectoplasm, had consciousness coming out of their, coming out of their skin in bioenergy, had on and on and on and on. When they talked about out of body, it was very body-centered. It had to do with the body and the body's vibration and the separation of the subtle body from the physical body, and etc. And all of these things are, they're all unanswerable. They're all hard problems. What's bioenergy? What's an etheric body? What's a subtle energy? Where's all that come from? Why is it attached to your body? What's it doing in there in your body? What do you need that for? And so we had just lots and lots of this. And the amusing thing was, the thing that I found really interesting was that most of them, about half of them, decried the unwarranted skepticism of the scientists who are just based in materialism and physical process. They said that's the problem, is all the science is into, if you can't write an equation for it, it isn't interesting, and if it's not materialism, material reductionism, they're just stuck in that belief. Now, what they wanted to talk about is how we ooze ectoplasm out, into the air. That's physical. That's requiring a physical body. We go out of body because this subtle body is attached to the physical body, and the physical body actually creates the subtle body, but somehow needs it, but sometimes lets go of it and it flies away. But sometimes it's attached with a silver cord, but sometimes it's not. So they have lots of discussions going on, you see, but it's all body-centered. It has to do with the body. If you didn't have a body, if you didn't have this physical body, you could never go out of body, because if you didn't have a physical body, you couldn't have a subtle body. So all of them that were decrying the materialism, basically, had materialistic ideas. They were all based in materialism. Well, not really their fault. They grew up in a culture where materialism was the fundamental reality, and everything has to be derived from that. And they're trying to look scientific, be scientific. They're trying to do better science. And if you want the scientists to pat you on the head and say, good work, you need to have a physical cause, a physical basis. So they look real hard for physical basis. They want to find that physical basis, because that will turn them into scientists. If they can say, okay, here's this subtle body, and here's how it is generated from the body and whatever. Now it's just physical process, and the scientists would welcome them in as brothers, right? Well, you see that this doesn't work that way, so the things never quite work out, and it's a problem. So it's people wanting to be materialists, even though they don't like the whole concept. Yes, they say, the consciousness is non-physical, and this non-physical consciousness is created by the physical body. And it's like, how does that work? How does a physical body make consciousness? So anyway, that's what I found out when I talked to experts. When I talked to people who are, right up there in the top of their field, that's the sort of thing. If you look at consciousness research, you will find that most of the conscious research that has to do with physicists are in showing how matter creates consciousness. There's this thing about, you hear it, about quantum mechanics. It's the quantum factor. It's quantum this, quantum that. Quantum is a buzzword now. And the rationale there is that quantum physics is non-local. that means it does strange things. It does things that aren't objective. Okay? You get information that you shouldn't have. Well, consciousness is non-local. You can get information that you shouldn't have. They're both non-local. Since consciousness has to be derived from the physical, and since quantum mechanics is the only thing physical that's non-local, well, obviously, consciousness is quantum mechanical. It's a quantum effect. Simple, right? That's the idea. Well, they've taken, there is this one attribute that they have in common, and that's non-local. But that's like saying, you know, birds fly, rockets fly, therefore birds are little rockets. You know, they just have this one attribute in common. They both fly. Therefore, one of them must be the cause of the other. That's not science. That's grasping for straws because you can't figure out anything else to do. And that's basically where it is. So I have reached out, I have tried to connect with those people, and in general, I found them not interested. They have their own thing, and they would probably see what I'm doing because it's not basically equations, and because it doesn't support physical matter being the only reality, as being pseudoscience. It's not real science. And it would tarnish their reputation to be seen being interested in something like that. So that's where it is. But now that's changing. As the virtual reality guys, you know, get more and more of them, they won't all roll their eyes when somebody mentions that, you know, that the virtual reality has to be created in other. They won't be able to escape that. And Planck was probably right. One funeral at a time. You know, we'll get to the future as the old guys go away, and the new younger people who've been playing virtual reality games, you know, since they were 8 years old, come along, and they will say, virtual reality, sure, I get that. You know, spent 3,000 hours playing it when I was a kid. Well, they won't have the problem. So I think that's coming. It's just a matter of time. But no, I haven't made any real success. Now I have a couple of physicists. When I did a talk in California, I got 2 physicists come out to the talk, sat through the whole talk, asked good questions, and it worked out really well. They were very interested. They found it very interesting, and they thought the concepts were interesting. One of them was a quantum mechanics guy, and he was trying to do some quantum mechanics theory with it. And the other one had written a book. You probably heard it. I think it's called The God Theory. Bernie, somebody. His name jumps my imagination. But they're very supportive. I think it's all really good stuff. So it's not everybody, but it's in general. I'm not too welcome in the physics fraternity yet, which is a good sign. Something I'm proud of. Yeah.
There's a question here.
Oui, j'ai une question sur l'émotion, l'émotion négative. Dans ce que je vois, c'est que quand j'ai une émotion, il n'y a pas d'acceptation de la situation. Et des moments, j'arrive à être dans le oui à ce qui est, pour une petite situation. Mais une situation plus importante, qui me mobilise beaucoup plus dans mon émotionnel, comme la maladie d'un être cher. Le oui est très difficile. Est-ce que vous avez un conseil, quelque chose pour que le joueur accepte la partie, quelle qu'elle soit?
Sure. That's a very good question. sometimes understanding the way reality works can be hard. Sometimes understanding why people are doing what they're doing can be very difficult, because there's people you love. And when there's people you love and care about, and you see that they are hurting themselves, that they're acting and doing in ways causing themselves misery, causing themselves harm, hurting the other people around them, and you can just see, if you just lighten up, if you just get positive, just wouldn't this or that, just make this little change, your life would be so much better. And you care about these people, and it's sad. Sometimes love can be sad, because there isn't anything you can do to make somebody else change. You can, though, help create an environment in which they change themselves. So I would say, when you're in a situation where there are things that are really sad that they're like that, and you don't have an ability to fix it, well, there's two things you can do. One, you can just let them be as they are, give them hugs, tell them you love them, and hope for the best. So you're there as support for them. So you're willing to help them give, even though you see them hurting themselves. You're just there to give them support to do what they have to do, and accept what they have to do, because it's them. They have free will, and you can't force your free will on them unless they're your child. If they're your dependent, then you can force some free will on them if they're incapacitated, like a child. They can't make their own decisions. But the second thing you can do is to try to create an environment where they will willingly change themselves, or see a bigger picture, and stop what they're doing that's causing pain for themselves. And you have to do that by understanding where they're coming from. You have to listen. You have to understand them. And you have to not approach it intellectually. If you approach it intellectually, look, cheer up. You have a lot of good things going on in your life. Don't be depressed. Look, all these happy stuff that you have here, that doesn't help somebody who's depressed. It makes them feel worse. They look at that and they say, yeah, there's all this happy stuff, and I just can't be part of it. Now they're twice as depressed. You have to not try to change how they think intellectually, because that won't help. You have to let them have an environment where they will change themselves at the being level. And often that means just giving them love, giving them support, and showing them perhaps a better way, not by telling them, but showing them in some way, non-intellectual, what a better way is. In other words, you might act positive, or you might act in a way that would help them try to emulate you. Now, I don't know your situation, but you can try to create an environment for them that's safe enough that they can change themselves. People don't change themselves because they're frightened. They're afraid to change. If everything's bad now, if I change, everything will get worse. So if you can give them a safe environment where they can change, that might help. But often in cases like that, there's just nothing you can do to help. And it's a very sad part of love, when people you care about hurt themselves, and continue to hurt themselves, and continue to hurt other people around them. And there is nothing you can do, and I guess the only solace I can give you is that they have free will. They have to do this. It's how they learn. They learn by doing and getting results of the learning. And this is one chapter in a very long book. This is not the end. It's not like they have this suffering and then it's all over and it's always a big waste. It isn't a big waste. They will learn something from it. When they end up in that virtual reality that happens after you die, they will have a life review. They will go over what the problems were, what they need to work on next time. And it'll all be valuable. It'll be a valuable educational experience. They'll try better. So they get another one, and they'll have another chapter in the book and another chapter after that. So don't feel like it's so, this is the end of everything. It's not. It's just one chapter in a long book. Sometimes the chapters are sad. So you have to accept it and let it be. If they're adults, you have to let them make their own free will choice. You can't force them to be anything other than they are. That didn't help much, I know. You know, it's a tough thing to deal with. But we can't change anybody but ourselves. We can just help other people change by giving them environments where they feel safe enough to change themselves. But that always doesn't work. Sometimes that just doesn't work. You can't make them feel safe enough. Or they don't want to feel better. Sometimes people get very attached to their misery. I hope that helps some.
Tu as une question?
Oui. Je ne sais pas trop comment la formuler. Moi, ce que je perçois, c'est que la conscience, elle habite les particules de matière. Donc, est-ce que ça veut dire, au sens de votre paradigme, qu'on est immergé, que notre réalité non virtuelle est immergée dans un espace à dimension plus grande, qui est la conscience?
Okay, as I define consciousness, consciousness requires a finite decision space. So consciousness has to be able to make a decision. It has to be able to choose between this and that. If there's no decision space, there's no choice, then there's no consciousness. Now that's just my definition of consciousness. And with that definition of consciousness, then you know, all the atoms and the trees and the rocks and so on aren't conscious. Now that doesn't mean that they can't be aware. Some things, particularly like trees and bushes and plants, might be aware in a very vague sense of awareness, but they don't really have choices to make. The tree can't say, I want to grow my roots sideways. Now the tree can say, water is over there, my roots will go toward it, but that's not a decision it makes. That's just because the way the tree's made, that automatically happens. Just like the sunflowers always follow the sun. That's not their choice. That's just the way they work. They do that. So anything that has choice has consciousness. So I don't think of atoms as having consciousness, nor rocks, nor trees. Maybe awareness in some things. So that's part of your question. But yes, we at virtual reality are a creation of consciousness. Our virtual reality, which is all this physical stuff, the whole physical universe is a creation of consciousness. It is a result of consciousness needing to evolve. Evolve being become more spiritual, higher quality consciousness. So we are consciousness. Everything that's fundamental is consciousness. Everything that is real is consciousness. Virtual realities are there to help consciousness evolve. So in that way, yes, we, the physical universe, is immersed in a sea of consciousness. You know, if you want to, if that's a metaphor that works for you, because it's a creation of consciousness. It's a device. It's a tool.
Je parle pas d'une métaphore, je parle d'un vécu perceptif. Je veux dire, moi, je travaille en thérapie avec mes mains et je sens nettement quand un corps est habité par la conscience, je continuerai pas. Et la santé est toujours liée au fait qu'il y a de la conscience dans le corps et l'absence de santé au fait qu'il n'y a pas de conscience dans le corps. Je veux dire, je ne parle pas du tout d'une conscience réflexive, je ne sais pas comment dire, c'est une perception, mais c'est une perception qui est très nette, ce n'est pas une pensée.
Okay. And give me an example of a body that has no consciousness. an example of a body that has no consciousness?
Un exemple d'un corps.
Non, je peux pas en donner. Mais toujours est-il qu'il y a quand même une différence.
Yes, I would agree with that. There is a difference between a body that has consciousness and one that does not. A rock doesn't have consciousness, and a bird does. I think we're having a problem to communicate here.
Il y a peut-être effectivement un problème de communication. J'entends vraiment pas au niveau conscience quelque chose de réflexif. C'est justement quelque chose qui est très réflexif. Ouais. Comme une intelligence primordiale, quoi, mais pas quelque chose qui... Pas mental.
Yeah, we're having trouble with the translation.
Je comprends assez bien vos explications au niveau physique, parce que j'ai étudié la physique il y a très longtemps. Mais depuis, j'ai plus travaillé dans la conscience, je ne sais pas comment dire ça, la conscience intérieure. Donc, j'essaye de mettre ce que mon vécu perceptif, au niveau de la perception profonde, en phase avec vos explications, parce qu'elles me sied, elles me paraissent justes, enfin voilà. Et j'essaye de mettre en phase les deux. Ce que je vis dans ma conscience profonde, je veux dire, voilà, avec le paradigme que vous présentez.
Okay, maybe I'll take a guess at it. You are aware. You can sense consciousness. You can sense awareness. Do you heal with your hands? Yeah.
Je parlais pas de guérison. La guérison, elle n'appartient pas à l'humain, à mon sens.
Well, then what do you do with your hands?
Là, ça nous rentre dans quelque chose de...
That sounds like a personal question, doesn't it?
Ouais. Non, c'est pas ça. C'est que ça rentre dans des explications longues et ça me gêne un peu de prendre toute la place.
Yeah. Well, I can talk some about healing, and I'm not sure. I don't feel like I really understood the question. And the translator's having a little difficulty putting it in English. People heal with their hands. People sense with their hands. People can use their hands to draw in energy from the sun. The hands can be special in that way. But all of this is tools. Just like in our healing, we used light beams, and we used dark and white. We used different colors in order to focus what we were doing on the healing. You can use tools such as your own hands, to do any number of things. Tools can be any sort of thing. In my theories, basically consciousness is the active ingredient. Conscious intent is what makes things happen. It's how we get information. It's how we change. I guess we call it energy, if you will. Conscious intent is the key. So there may be many tools. You may be that you can use your hands in many ways, or your body, or just your senses, or just your feeling, and you have learned how to use that, the hands, the feeling, or whatever, as tools to help you focus your intent. Reiki is a healing modality, and at the early stages of Reiki, it's a hands-on technique. They feel energy, they can feel them in the client, they can feel blockages, then they can fix the blockages, but it has to do with the hands-on. It's a touching thing. I think in advanced Reiki, they don't have to touch. It can be long distance. It can be on the other side of the world, and it works just as well. So the hands are part of a tool set for focusing intent, and that intent then can change things, can modify things, and can derive information for you. So I'm not sure exactly what you do. You told me something about you use your hands, you can feel consciousness in things and not feel consciousness in things, so that confuses me a little. But taking a wild guess at it, and that is that focused intent is the active ingredient in whatever it is we do. The rest are tools. And those tools sometimes are necessary to help us focus our intent. There's nothing wrong with tools. It's not that tools are not important or not good. They're very good. And we all should create our own tools for this that help us focus our intent. But I suspect that I'm not sure what you do, so I asked what you do with your hands. If you're a healer or you get energy and emotional data, and none of that. But this is no. But
non, déjà, je dirais, dans mon vécu, dans ma perception, la conscience, vraiment en amont de toute réflexion, la conscience, c'est un attribut de la vie. Enfin, moi, je le sens comme ça. Alors, ce que je fais précisément, j'ai appris à aller à la rencontre d'un mouvement qui est imperceptible quand on n'est pas entraîné, qui anime toutes les structures du corps, aussi profond qu'on peut aller. Et ce mouvement est porteur d'une conscience, qui n'est absolument pas une conscience de pensée.
Okay.
J'ai dit que ce mouvement est porteur d'une conscience qui n'est absolument pas une conscience au sens de la pensée, ni de l'intention.
Yeah, I think I understand a little better, but you have a concept of consciousness that is very helpful for you, and you're using that concept of consciousness to affect things, and it seems to be working, and you're sensitive to that, and I would say that's a tool. It's a good tool, and it works, and you should use it. And I know lots of people who have tools that do this sort of thing. Now, that sometimes people don't like their tools to be called tools. Sometimes they're tools. I don't know. Sometimes their tools are sort of sacred to them in the sense that their tools are real, and the tools are necessary. But tools are wonderful, and I can kind of get a sense of what you're doing, and I think it fits in fine with my theory. I would just probably describe it in different words. I wouldn't describe necessarily it as consciousness. My definition of consciousness is very specific to making choices, which is a little different than the consciousness you are. So we're kind of talking about two different things, which is maybe what the confusion is. You're talking about something a little different when you say consciousness. So you're saying consciousness, and Yeah, and I'm hearing something else. I think that's part of the problem. But I think what you're doing is you're using some, you notice some motion, you do things, it has an effect, and you have a process in your mind that explains that effect, and that helps focus your intent to create the effect, and that's why it works. That's why you're successful. That's why you can make a difference. But the active ingredient is your intent, not necessarily the tools that you use. If that, well, we tried. We really tried.
Yeah,
Thank
I think
you.
it's really that like you have different concept of consciousness.
Yes, I think so
She
too.
really, the sense I have is consciousness for her is related to some cognitive function related to the brain. It's not necessarily related to choice. You know, so
Right. Yeah, we're talking apples and oranges, and
Yes,
conscious.
yes.
Why it's so difficult?
So,
Mhm.
we need to adjust the language first. No, I know it's stupid there. Yes, you have a question?
Before we were meditating, you were saying that the goal of meditation is to quiet the monkey mind, the chatter in your mind. I'm wondering, why does that seem to be a natural state, and why is it so hard to overcome that you need like 2 months of meditation to get to the point where it stops?
It's an unnatural state, but it's a very common state. It's common because the reason you have all that chatter is because of the fear and the ego, the need to control and track things. A lot of that is also, you live a kind of a high stress life, then stress keeps a lot of things, you know, you got a lot of balls in the air at the same time. You're juggling a whole lot of things, which keeps you to have to be focused on, I have to be here at this time, I have to be there at that time, I've got all these things to do, I've got appointments to make, I got homework to turn in, I got my kids to go take the, you know, ballet, and you got all this stuff going on, which makes your life very busy. And if your life is like that, it's hard to focus. So that's part of it, is the lifestyle we have is we don't sit in the field and watch our sheep eat anymore. You know, we're very preoccupied with things. But if you can just shut that off and let it go, if you're not attached to those things, you do them, but you're not emotionally attached to them. That's where the ego comes in, and the fear of creating the ego. If you're attached to those, I have to do this, otherwise this horrible thing will happen. You know, that's fear. If I don't do this, there's something awful. Well, if you don't pick your daughter up after school and you leave her at school, something bad will happen, right? So you have things like that. And if you're that busy and you have all that, then meditation just may be difficult. But on the other hand, if you've got an hour yet to go before you have to pick up your daughter at school, whatever else is on your mind, you should be able to take a half an hour of that and just let it go. Set an alarm with your cell phone so that you know you won't miss it, and just let it all go. And at that point, not being able to let it go is because of an attachment. You're attached to it. You can't stop thinking about it. You know, you're constantly going over it. That's not normal or healthy. That's something that is probably, you know, an ego-based thing. I don't know, I'd have to know specifics to say that, but just probably, I'm just making that up, it's probably an ego issue. But if you can get a half an hour, or even 10 minutes, where you have time, just take the time, let it go. If you've got responsibilities, you have to fulfill your responsibilities. You've got that too. The responsibilities come first. We're in this reality first, and then we're doing our meditation on the side and in the margins, because we come here to grow up, and that means interaction. That means being responsible, picking your daughter up, you know, after school on time. So I don't think they're incompatible. I think you can meditate. Most people have trouble with it because they have no discipline. Their minds just fly around without their even thinking about it. They're just constantly grabbing stuff, constantly churning on stuff, constantly trying to control things, constantly want to evaluate, how am I doing compared to this? They're comparing, they're evaluating. They're making sure that they have things come out the way they want. That it's a lot of manipulation and a lot of control, because we have this fear that if we don't control everything, it'll all go bad on us. The only way we keep it from going bad on us is by controlling it. So most of us in this life need to control and manipulate events to come out the way we want. And that takes a lot of energy. And it usually doesn't work and leaves us frustrated, but it leaves us chattering all the time. So I think it is typical. We live in very anxious times. We're very busy people, but we still have a problem of letting go. Even when we have time to let go, we can't seem to just leave it alone. And that's a skill that's worth learning. I think it's a matter of discipline. You know, you don't discipline a child and they get kind of wild and unruly. It's the same with your mind. If you don't discipline your mind, it just gets wild and unruly. It just runs around and yammers all the time like a child does if they're not disciplined. Your mind does the same kind of thing. So you just need to tell it to sit down and be quiet. And of course it whines and doesn't like that. But you can train it to sit down and be quiet. It's worth doing. It gives you a moment of peace. It gives you a moment, maybe 10 minutes of utter peace and tranquility in your day, and that can be very valuable. So it's worth taking the trouble to do it. But it is hard. If we were all perfect people in a perfect world, everybody would meditate naturally without trying.